What would you do if you found someone hanging between life and death in the middle of the desert, stared down by a message meant to warn the whole world? Under the burning New Mexico sun, Calder Wyatt rode across the dry land with the slow rhythm of a man used to long days alone. Dust rose under his mare's hooves. The world around him was silent and wide. Calder liked it this way. No noise, no people, no surprises. But that morning, the land broke its silence. He heard a sound so faint he almost thought it was the wind. A soft whimper. It rose and faded like a breath fighting to stay alive. Calder stopped his horse, head tilted. His heart slowed. The sound returned, thin and sharp. Something was wrong. He dismounted, tied his horse to a dead limb, and moved forward with his rifle over his back. His boots stepped carefully between rocks and dry brush. The silence around him seemed to tighten with each step. Then he reached a ring of old cottonwoods and saw her, a young Apache girl hung by her wrists from a thick branch. Her arms stretched high above her. Her body drooped toward the ground, feet barely touching the dust. Her skin was dark from sun and dirt. Her long black hair stuck to her face. Her breaths came hard and shallow. She was alive, but only just. Calder's eyes moved to the sign nailed above her head. Crude wooden plank. Thick red letters. White man, don't forgive. The words hit him like a punch. They felt angry. They felt accusing. They felt like a curse meant for anyone who stood near her. He stepped back, breath-catching. Someone had left her here to die slow. Calder looked around, searching the ridges and rocks for movement. Nothing. Only the dry wind whispering through dead leaves. He reached for the knife on his belt. His hand shook, not from fear of her, but from the weight of that message. He moved close. Her face turned slightly. She was young, maybe 18. Dust covered her cheeks. Blood dried at the corner of her mouth. The rope around her wrists had cut deep into her skin. "You hear me, girl?" he asked softly. She did not answer. Only a faint groan left her cracked lips. "I won't hurt you," he said, voice low and rough. He touched the rope. It was old and twisted tight. Someone had wanted her to suffer. Calder swallowed hard and lifted his knife. His heart thudded with a strange mix of fear and anger. "That sign ain't who I am," he whispered. One strong slice and the rope gave way. She fell forward into his arms. Her body was light as if the desert had taken half her strength. Calder lowered her gently to the ground. Her eyes fluttered open. Dark, wide, lost. They watched him but did not understand him yet. He poured water from his canteen onto a cloth and touched it to her lips. She drank the drops with slow effort. Her fingers pulled weakly at his sleeve as if trying to stay awake. "You got a name?" he asked. No answer. He wrapped his coat around her thin shoulders, then lifted her into his arms and carried her back through the trees. The sky burned orange as the sun dipped low. His ranch came into view, small and lonely against the wide land. The windmill creaked. The barn sagged. The house stood simple but strong. Inside, he laid her on his cot. Her eyes followed him. He warmed water in a basin and knelt before her. Her feet were bruised and cut. He worked with slow hands, washing away the dust and blood. She flinched at first, but her feet stayed in his grip. He kept his voice calm. "I'm just cleaning up a bit," he said. When he wrapped her feet in soft cloth, she looked at him with something new. Not trust yet, but not fear either. "You look like someone strong," he murmured. "Strong like a river after rain. I'll call you Lena for now." She blinked once. He covered her with a blanket, then stepped back. "If you're hungry, I left food on the table," he said, though he knew she would not eat much tonight. He grabbed his bedroll and walked toward the door. She needed space, and so did he. He paused before stepping out. She had turned slightly on the cot. Her eyes were closed, breathing steady now. Outside, he emptied the blood-tinted water from the basin. The earth drank it silently. For the first time in a long while, the ranch did not feel empty. 3 days passed with slow desert time. Lena ate little, spoke not at all, watched everything. Calder slept in the barn each night but checked the cabin often. Something about her silence made his chest pull tight. On the 4th morning he saw it. A fresh boot print near the barn. Military heel. Cavalry issue. The print was only hours old. Someone was looking for her. Calder scanned the ridge. Nothing moved. When he entered the house, Lena's body stiffened under the blanket. Her eyes followed him. "You see anyone?" he asked. She did not reply. Her silence held fear. That afternoon, Calder sat on the porch with his rifle. The wind quieted. The sky felt tight. Then a rider appeared in the distance. Dust trailed behind his chestnut horse. He wore a blue cavalry coat. Lieutenant Graham. The soldier dismounted and held out a wanted poster, a sketch of a young Apache girl. Sharp eyes, long hair, wanted for murder. Dangerous. Reward $50. Calder felt the old heat rise in his veins. "You seen her?" the soldier asked. Calder folded the paper and handed it back. "No," he said. The soldier studied him, confused, but not sure enough to press. "If you find her, tell us. She is trouble." Calder only nodded. When the rider left, Calder turned toward the house. Lena stood behind the thin curtain. She had heard everything. Her eyes held fear and something else. Calder took off his hat and spoke gently. "They came asking for you. I told them no." Her breath shook. "I don't know your story," he said, "but I made my choice." And for the first time, she looked at him with a flicker of trust. What if the truth you've buried finally rises, and the person you saved begins to show the wounds you never knew how to heal? The desert afternoon lay heavy over the ranch. Calder sat sharpening his knife on the porch, each slow scrape echoing into the empty yard. He tried to focus on the steady rhythm, but his thoughts kept circling back to the girl inside. Lena, quiet, watchful, carrying something too heavy for someone so young. Then he heard a soft crunch of dirt. Not danger, not a stranger. Lena. She stepped outside for the first time on her own. Bare feet touched the earth with careful steps. The blanket he had given her hung around her like a second skin. Calder froze, watching her with quiet surprise. She didn't look at him. She walked toward the space near the barn, where the wind had swept the ground clean. There she knelt, letting the blanket fall to her elbows. She picked up a stick and began to draw in the dirt. Calder waited. Then he stood and walked toward her, stopping a few feet away. She drew a bird. Its wings stretched wide, caught in flames that curved around it like a rising storm. The lines were sharp and fierce. Calder had seen pain carved into many things, but nothing like this. "What's that?" he asked softly. Lena did not look up. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, in a quiet voice, she answered, "Bird in fire! My people's sign!" Calder crouched beside her. He could feel the tension in her shoulders, the tightness of someone carrying memories too sharp to touch. She pointed the stick at the bird's chest. "My father's mark. For our family." Calder's breath caught. He recognized grief when it sat heavy in someone's bones. He waited, letting her speak at her pace. "Soldiers came last spring," she said. "Said we must move. Said we were danger." She paused. The stick trembled in her hand. "We said no. Our land was ours. Our river was ours. They burned everything." Her voice cracked. "My mother died in the fire. My brothers, too. My father, they hung him." Calder's jaw tightened. His chest felt too small for the anger rising inside him. "I hid," she whispered. "They found me, beat me, tied me. Said I stole a rifle. I didn't." She turned to him then. For the first time, her eyes met his fully. They were dark, fierce, wounded. "I did nothing wrong," she said. Calder didn't look away. His voice came low but steady. "I believe you." The stick fell from her hand. Her breath shook. Then her shoulders trembled, and she broke. Sobs shook through her in waves too big for her small frame. She folded forward, arms around her knees, crying into the dust. Calder didn't touch her. He didn't rush her. He only pressed his hand into the dirt beside the bird she drew. Not touching her, but standing with her. Slowly, her cries softened. When she lifted her head again, her face streaked with tears and dust. She whispered the words that changed something between them. "You can call me Lena." Calder nodded once. "All right then, Lena it is." They sat beside each other until the sun dipped behind the ridge. The bird in the dirt faded with the light, but its meaning stayed. That night, Lena stood near the window while Calder tended the fire. The quiet between them felt different now. Not heavy, not fearful, just shared. She turned to him suddenly. "You want to know the truth?" Calder looked up, waiting. She sat across from him and spoke again. "My father was a miner chief. Our band peaceful. We traded with settlers. We tried to live." Calder nodded, listening. "A white woman died near our land. Her husband said it was us. It was not." Lena's voice grew tight. "He killed her. Everyone knew, but they blamed us anyway." Calder's grip tightened on the spoon he held. "They burned our camp, shot my brothers, hung my father. I hid. They caught me. They tied me to that tree. They left that sign so no one would save me." She stared at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Why did you cut me down?" Calder's breath slowed. He looked at her, and the truth left his mouth like something he had carried too long. "Because once, I didn't save someone." Lena frowned gently. "My family," Calder said. "Raiders came, burned the ranch. Apache, they said. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. My sister was in the barn. I heard her crying. I waited for help. I didn't go in." He swallowed. "She died." The silence held them like a closing hand. "You saved me because you couldn't save her," Lena whispered. Calder nodded once. She looked at him, searching his face. "If I had been white, would you still have saved me?" Calder stood and walked around the table. He stopped in front of her and gently lifted her chin with his hand. His touch was soft, his eyes steady. "I don't love skin," he said. "I love what breathes under it." Lena's eyes glistened. She reached up, took his hand, and pressed her cheek into his palm. Then, slowly, they leaned into each other and kissed. It was soft at first, unsure, then deeper, fuller. A kiss that warmed the room more than the fire ever could. Later, they stood in the kitchen together, candlelight flickering over the worn wood. Their shadows moved as one on the wall. Outside, the desert wind grew quiet. Inside, something broken began to heal. But the peace did not last long. By noon the next day, 3 riders appeared on the horizon. Local men. Armed. Their leader wore a tin badge that meant nothing and everything in these lands. "You harboring someone, Wyatt?" the man asked. Calder's voice stayed calm. "No." "A girl." "Apache," the man pressed. "There's a reward. $50. Calder stood firm. "No one here." The men stared long and hard, then rode off. But they would be back. That night, Calder burned the hateful wooden sign in the fire pit. The flames swallowed the words slowly, fighting to stay alive, then faded into ash. Lena stood beside him, watching the hate burn away. Her shoulder brushed his. The firelight warmed their faces. "Thank you," she said softly. Calder looked at her the way a thirsty man looked at water. The next morning brought stillness. No wind, no whispers. Only a warning settled deep in Calder's bones. They had to leave. "Tonight," he said. Lena stepped closer, her voice barely a breath. "I want to live as your wife." Calder closed his eyes, letting the meaning wash into him. By sundown, they rode south under the stars, racing toward freedom. But 10 miles from the border, a rifle cracked through the night. Calder fell from his horse, blood soaking his shirt. Lena screamed his name. They staggered toward the rocks as bullets tore the air behind them. Calder's strength faded. The desert felt too big, too dark, too fast. Yet he still whispered through the pain, "We can make it." Lena dragged him into a narrow pass, her breath sharp and desperate. Tonight, they were fighting for their lives. What would you do if the one person you loved more than your own life lay bleeding in your arms while danger closed in on every side? The night wrapped around them like a cold hand. Inside the narrow stone pass, Calder leaned against the wall, breathing hard, blood soaking through his shirt. His face had gone pale, but his eyes stayed fixed on Lena, as if she were the only thing anchoring him to the world. She tore open his shirt with shaking hands and pressed her palm to the wound. Her breath came fast. "Stay awake," she whispered. Calder tried to smile, but the pain tightened his jaw. "I'm here," he said softly. "I ain't going anywhere." Outside the pass, the riders shouted orders. They circled, trying to find another way through the cliffs. The sound echoed through the stone like thunder. Lena looked toward the entrance, then back at Calder. "I won't lose you," she said. He reached up, touched her cheek with a trembling hand. "You won't," he whispered, but even he wasn't sure. She gripped his hand tight, refusing to let go. Minutes crawled by. The desert night grew colder. The voices outside faded, then returned, then faded again. The riders were searching for a way in, but had not found one yet. Calder's breaths grew shallow. "Lena," he murmured. She leaned close, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "Yes." "What's your real name?" he whispered. She hesitated only a moment, then lifted his hand and pressed it to her chest, right over her heart. "Ayanna," she said softly. "Ayanna Salvatierra." Calder closed his eyes, letting the name sink into him like a blessing. "Ayanna," he repeated, "peaceful river." She nodded. "It is who I was before they tried to take everything," she said. He opened his eyes again, meeting hers. "You're the only peace I ever found," he said. The words hit her deep, trembling through her like wind through leaves. Before she could speak, Ayanna stiffened. The horses outside had stopped moving. Silence pressed against the stone. Then faint footsteps began creeping along the ridge above them. They had found the pass. Ayanna stood, her heart pounding. She grabbed Calder's rifle and positioned herself near the edge of the gap. She had never fired a cavalry gun, but she knew how to aim, how to survive. Calder tried to rise but fell back with a groan. "Ayanna," he rasped. Don't do anything foolish." She looked back at him, her eyes dark and fierce. "I will not let them take you," she said. Then she turned toward the pass. A shadow moved above the rocks. Then another. Voices hushed. Boots scraped against stone. Ayanna lifted the rifle. A shot cracked through the night. A rider yelled. Another shot rang out, hitting the rock inches from her face. Stone chips flew. Calder forced himself up on his elbow. "Ayanna!" he shouted. But she did not back down. She stepped farther into the open, her voice rising like fire in dry grass. "You want him?" she yelled into the darkness. "You come through me!" The echoes carried far. For a long moment, there was no answer. Then the riders turned their guns away. A different voice called out. A tired, older voice. "Girl," it said, "we're not paid enough to die in that pass." Boots shifted, saddles creaked. The men hesitated, then one spoke sharply. "Leave her! We'll catch him near the border." More footsteps, more horses. Then the sound faded into the night. Ayanna kept the rifle raised for a long moment, her breath sharp and quick. When she was sure they were gone, she lowered the barrel and rushed back to Calder. She dropped to her knees beside him. "They're gone," she whispered. Calder's eyes softened. "You scared them off." She leaned over him, pressing her forehead to his. "I would face 100 more if it meant keeping you alive." He swallowed hard, emotion tightening his throat. "We gotta move," he said. "Can't stay here." She nodded. "I know." With steady hands, Ayanna tore a strip of cloth from her sash and bound Calder's wound tightly. Then she helped him stand, guiding his arm around her shoulders. Together they took slow steps toward the exit of the pass. By dawn, they reached the river. A narrow, wild stretch of water that marked the border. Its current whispered against smooth stones. Beyond it lay safety. Beyond it lay freedom. Ayanna turned to Calder. "You ready?" she asked. He managed a faint smile. "With you, always." She stepped into the water first, holding his weight as they crossed. The river climbed to their knees, to their thighs. Calder winced with each step, but he kept going, leaning into her strength. When they reached the far bank, Ayanna sank to her knees, breath shaking. Calder knelt beside her, his hand finding hers. They were free. Months passed. On the far side of the border, where pine trees grew tall and the land smelled of sage, Calder built a small lodge by a gentle river. Ayanna made it a home. She stitched shirts for the child growing beneath her heart. Calder trained a young Mustang, teaching it patience the way she had taught him peace. They lived quietly, not hiding, not running, living. One evening, Ayanna walked to the river, her belly round beneath her woven sash. She placed both hands over her child and whispered soft words into the wind. "Little one," she said, "your father loved me before he ever knew my name, and he saved me before he knew my story." Footsteps approached. Calder came to her side, taking her hand. She leaned into him. "Do you think the world will ever forgive what happened?" she asked. Calder kissed her forehead. "We don't live for the world," he said. "We live for us." She smiled, tears warm at the corners of her eyes. They stood watching the river drift under the orange sky. The water moved slow and steady, like a heartbeat, like a promise. Ayanna Salvatierra. The girl once left to die beneath a hateful message, now lived in a home carved from hope. A wife, a mother, a survivor. Calder Wyatt, the lonely rancher who carried guilt heavier than any saddle, had found his peace in the woman the world tried to erase. Their love had started with pain, grown through danger, and endured through fire. Now it lived like the river, steady, endless, free.